Utica, North Africa, April 46 BC. In a small room lit by a single oil lamp, a Roman senator asks for his sword back. His friends have already hidden it once tonight. They know exactly what he intends to do with it. His name is Marcus Porcius Cato. History remembers him as Cato the Younger, and for the next few minutes, we are going to understand exactly why he chose this room, this night, and this ending. Outside these walls, Julius Caesar's legions are one day's march away, and Caesar has already sent word: surrender, and you will be forgiven. Cato reads that word, forgiven, and feels something closer to disgust than relief, because forgiveness assumes Caesar had the right to judge him in the first place. So instead, he spends his last evening exactly as he has spent thousands of others, in philosophical conversation with his friends, debating a very Stoic paradox, that only the wise man is truly free. Then he retires to his room, picks up a single scroll, Plato's Phaedo, the dialogue on the immortality of the soul, and reads it twice. Everything that happens next was not a breakdown. It was the final, deliberate act of a man who had been rehearsing his principles his entire life. To understand why a Roman statesman would rather die by his own hand than live under a king, we have to go back 60 years to a frightened, furious child standing in front of a dictator's palace. Rome, around 85 BC. A small boy is being carried by his tutor toward the palace of the dictator Sulla. The boy is maybe 4 years old. He has already asked more than once why nobody has simply killed the man. This is Cato as a child, orphaned early, raised in the household of his uncle, the reformist politician Livius Drusus, in a Rome being torn apart by proscriptions, civil war, and one dictator after another. According to Plutarch, when other boys in the house played at flattering Sulla's authority, Cato refused every time, no matter how the older children mocked him for it. One day his tutor, Sarpedon, brought him to Sulla's residence on business. The boy saw the severed heads of Sulla's enemies displayed near the entrance. Cato turned to his tutor and asked a simple question: why does no one kill this man? Sarpedon answered that people feared Sulla more than they hated him. Cato's response, as Plutarch records it, was to ask for a sword right there, so that he could free his country from a tyrant himself at age 7. That single sentence, from a child too young to understand political consequence, would turn out to be the exact sentence that defined the rest of his adult life. A boy who asks for a sword to kill a tyrant doesn't grow into a cautious man. He grows into someone incapable of looking away from power he thinks is illegitimate. If you've ever been the only person in a room saying this isn't right, you already understand the feeling driving everything Cato does next. Stay with us. By his 20s, Cato had built a reputation nobody else in Rome even wanted. The one senator who could not be bought, flattered, or intimidated. He trained under the Stoic philosopher Anticato of Tyre, and then did something almost nobody in Roman public life did. He actually lived the philosophy. He walked through the forum without a tunic under his toga, in whether that made other senators wrap themselves in cloaks, just to train himself to be indifferent to discomfort. He refused to campaign for office the way everyone else did. No bribing voters, no theatrical crowd-pleasing speeches, no shaking every hand in the marketplace. When he lost an election because of it, he shrugged. Losing honestly to Cato was not actually a loss. In 64 BC, Cato became quaestor, the official in charge of Rome's treasury, and inherited a department that had been quietly looted by corrupt officials for a generation. He personally studied the old financial laws that everyone else had forgotten existed, prosecuted the treasury clerks who had been forging records, and forced them to return stolen public funds. For the first time in living memory, Roman officials were afraid of the treasury office, not because Cato had more power than his predecessors, but because he was the first one who refused every bribe to look away. Cato had just proven that Stoic discipline wasn't a theory for dinner parties. It was a weapon you could point directly at corruption. And in 3 years, he would need every bit of it, in the most famous debate the Roman Senate ever held. If a single incorruptible person in the right office unsettles you this much, imagine what a whole room of them could do. Tell us in the comments what institution you wish had one. December 63 BC. Rome has just uncovered a conspiracy to burn the city and murder half the Senate, led by a bankrupt aristocrat named Catiline. 5 of the conspirators are already in custody. The Senate must now decide, in open debate, what to do with men who tried to destroy the Republic. Julius Caesar rises first, arguing for mercy, life imprisonment, not execution, because killing citizens without trial sets a dangerous precedent that could one day be used against anyone. It is, by every account, a brilliant and popular speech. The Senate begins to sway. Even Cicero, presiding as consul, senses the room shifting toward Caesar's position. Then Cato stands. He does not attack the conspirators' character. He attacks the Senate's cowardice, accusing his colleagues of debating word choices while Rome burns. Cato argues that mercy for men who wanted to slaughter the Senate is not virtue. It's the Republic quietly signing its own execution order out of politeness. According to Sallust, who was in the room, Cato's speech was so forceful that it physically reversed the vote. Senators who had leaned toward Caesar's mercy stood up and changed sides before he even finished. The conspirators were executed that night, and Caesar, outmaneuvered in public for the first time by a man 10 years younger than him, did not forget who did it. This is the moment the 2 men who would eventually break the Roman Republic became visible enemies in front of the entire Senate. If you want to see exactly how that rivalry ends, stay subscribed, because this was the easy part, and it only escalates from here. Cato's victory in the Senate made him famous, and made him the single biggest obstacle to 3 men who each wanted more power than the Republic was designed to give anyone. In 60 BC, Julius Caesar, Pompey the Great, and the financier Crassus form a secret alliance historians now call the First Triumvirate. Its first real target is Cato. They cannot bribe him, so instead they get him promoted, offering Cato the prestigious, distant assignment of annexing the island kingdom of Cyprus, conveniently removing their most dangerous critic from Rome for 2 years. Cato almost refuses, recognizing the maneuver instantly. But he takes the post anyway, reasoning that the Republic needs Cyprus handled honestly more than it needs him in Rome scoring political points. And he handles it with a level of personal integrity that stuns even his enemies. He keeps his own account books, refuses gifts from the Cypriot king, and returns to Rome having sent back roughly 7,000 talents of silver without skimming a single coin for himself. It should have been a triumph. Instead, Cato discovers that while he was gone, the political ground in Rome shifted permanently against everything he'd spent his life defending. By 49 BC, Caesar, now the most powerful general in the Roman world, fresh off conquering Gaul, is ordered by the Senate to disband his army. He refuses. Caesar leads a single legion across the Rubicon River, the legal boundary no general was allowed to cross with troops, and marches on Rome itself. The Republic Cato had spent his whole life protecting is now, officially, at war with itself. Notice what actually beat Cato here. Not a bribe, not a threat, not an argument he lost. A system that simply moved the danger somewhere he couldn't reach it. If you've ever watched integrity get quietly outmaneuvered instead of defeated, like this video, because it's about to get a lot more violent. Cato had opposed Pompey for most of his career. He even blocked Pompey's political ambitions more than once. Now, with Caesar marching on Rome, Cato joins Pompey's army anyway. Not because he trusts Pompey, because Pompey, whatever his flaws, still represents the Senate and the rule of law, and Caesar, marching an army into his own country, represents the alternative. It's one of the clearest examples in history of a Stoic principle in action, choosing the harder, less satisfying side, because it's the right one, not because you like the people on it. In 48 BC, at the Battle of Pharsalus in Greece, Caesar crushes Pompey's forces decisively. Pompey flees to Egypt, where he is murdered the moment he steps off the boat. Cato survives, and instead of surrendering, leads the remaining Republican forces on a brutal overland march, hundreds of miles across the Libyan desert, to regroup in North Africa. When the Republican army needs a new supreme commander, Cato, the most respected man among them and arguably the most capable, refuses the position. He hands command to Metellus Scipio instead, purely because Scipio outranks him by seniority, and Cato refuses to violate Roman command tradition even in a desperate, collapsing war. It's an almost absurd level of principle. A man fighting to save the rule of law refusing to bend a single rule of law himself, even when bending it might help him win. That decision, command by principle, not by ambition, is the last real choice Cato gets to make before the war finally catches up with him at a coastal city called Utica. Notice he never once fought for a person, only for a system. If you know someone who'd do the same, this is a good moment to send them this video. After Scipio's forces are also crushed, at the Battle of Thapsus in 46 BC, Utica is the last Republican stronghold left standing, and Cato is the man in charge of defending it. He knows the city cannot hold. He also knows Caesar, ever the political showman, would love nothing more than to publicly pardon the Republic's most famous defender. So Cato spends his final days doing something almost nobody expects from a man about to die. He organizes the safe evacuation of every citizen and ally who wants to leave Utica personally, before thinking about himself at all. On his last evening, he hosts a dinner with his remaining friends and his own son, and steers the conversation, deliberately, toward a Stoic paradox, that only a free man can truly be said to own anything, including his own life. His friends, sensing exactly what he's planning, quietly remove his sword from the room while he bathes. Cato notices immediately, demands it back, and reportedly strikes the servant who won't hand it over hard enough to bruise his own hand. This is not calm resignation. It's controlled, furious resolve. Alone in his room, he picks up Plato's Phaedo, the dialogue where Socrates calmly discusses why a philosopher shouldn't fear death, and reads the entire thing, twice. Then near dawn, he stabs himself. His household finds him still breathing, and a doctor rushes to sew the wound closed. The moment he regains enough strength to move, Cato tears his own stitches out with his hands and dies on his own terms, not the doctor's, and not Caesar's. When Caesar hears the news, witnesses say his face changes. He reportedly says, "Cato, I begrudge you your death, as you begrudge me the chance to save you. A pardon only works on someone who wants to be forgiven." Cato made sure that was never true. Here's what should surprise you. Cato's death didn't end his influence on Rome, it multiplied it. Caesar, now the undisputed master of the Roman world, is so unsettled by a dead man that he personally writes a pamphlet attacking him, called the Anticato, one of the only times in history a dictator felt threatened by a corpse. Cicero writes his own eulogy simply titled Cato. The word itself becomes shorthand for the next 1800 years for a person who cannot be bought, bent, or broken. In 1712, an English playwright named Joseph Addison writes Cato, a tragedy, dramatizing these final days at Utica for the stage. That play becomes wildly popular in one very specific place, colonial America, where it's performed for George Washington's freezing, half-starved troops at Valley Forge to remind them why they were still fighting. Lines from that play echo almost word for word through the American Revolution. Nathan Hale's famous last words and Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty" or "Give me death" both borrow directly from Cato's own script. A Roman senator who refused to compromise with one man's power ends up, 18 centuries later, supplying the language an entire revolution used to justify refusing the exact same thing. That's the actual afterlife of integrity. Not a statue, not a monument, but a sentence someone else needed badly enough to steal. You are probably never going to face a choice as extreme as Cato's, but you will face smaller versions of it constantly, a place where saying the honest thing costs you something, and staying quiet would be so much easier. Pick one line this week that you will not cross regardless of the cost, and actually hold it even when nobody's watching, the way Cato held his in an empty room with no audience at all. If this is the kind of history that sharpens how you live, subscribe for the next one in this series and tell us in the comments, whose line would you borrow?